Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we count down our favorite moments from Resident Evil. Number 1, when you shoot the zombie. Number 2, when you shoot the zombie. Number 3, when you shoot the zombie.
Patrick.
What?
You don't have to do that anymore.
Thank you. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, we're talking about Resident Evil, which means I know you're doing great.
It's a wonderful day to be alive.
Look, man, there are few things. Have I ever told you about the Resident Evil collage that my brother and I made one Christmas?
No.
Okay, so my brother and I played a lot of Resident Evil games together. It was just it is a common video game thing between us. And so we love the games, right? And we were at our parents' house one Christmas. This is before they moved out of the house. This is the house we grew up in. And we had all of these Resident Evil games like stored away in a box, like the original Resident Evil for PlayStation, Resident Evil 2, 3, Code Veronica, and maybe the remakes, but maybe it was just those four main games, and probably like the director's cut of Resident Evil as well. And we took the instruction booklets and the disc and made like a big collage with them that I kept in. It was in my apartment on Gramercy for a while, just like behind a dresser. But yeah, it was how we were like, thank you, Resident Evil, for entertaining us. Now we honor you as a DIY art project on some Christmas night.
That's amazing.
It was great. We are so excited to be talking about Resident Evil here because look, there's a bunch of Resident Evil games out on Switch now.
Really, what a blessing.
Yeah,
this is.
It's such a blessing. I'm very excited. So we'll hurry through the business at the top here so that we can actually get to talking about our favorite moments from the games. But if you would like to borrow my copy of Sonic Forces, you can. All you got to do is email us at nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com with your mailing address or some mailing address, and I send you my copy of Sonic Forces. You play it for as long as you want, and then you send it back.
Here's another thing you can do.
Yes.
Is get our Detective Pikachu trading cards.
Look, they're trading cards. They're playing cards. They're all the kinds of cards. You can play them in the Pokemon playing card game, trading card game, Pokemon card game. You guys know the Pokemon game. I don't need to explain it. We have these cards from Seeing Detective Pikachu. You could own them instead of us. All you have to do is recommend our show to someone else on Twitter. Make sure to tag us. That's at NinCart Society. And then, we'll start giving these things out. All right, Mark, are you ready?
So ready.
I'm so ready. That's the fastest we've ever done the introduction to this show. And I think the show is better for it. Let's do it. Moments, Mark. Top 5 moments.
Do we want to talk a little bit about why we love Resident Evil so much?
Scary. Zombies.
It's scary.
Mm-hmm.
There's zombies. But I feel like... how do you feel about Silent Hill? I feel like Silent Hill and Resident Evil are like the two big horror franchises.
Yeah.
In the universe.
I mean, you can count me out of Silent Hill.
In the known universe, I guess.
That's right.
Presumably.
There are
somewhere else there might be.
We're in a multiverse. Obviously, everyone knows we all saw... Well, I don't know, that might be a spoiler. Look. I don't need Silent Hill in my life.
Yeah, I feel like... Okay. We've talked about in the past how video game stories are really hard and they're really hard to do well.
Yes.
And Silent Hill is more I would say more psychological horror-y.
Yep.
Than Resident Evil is, which is just good old-fashioned zombies.
Yep.
And so it's very difficult to make a good psychological horror video game.
Yes.
Resident Evil doesn't bother with that.
No.
It's just it's a rip-roaring good time.
Yeah, what's scary about Resident Evil? There's a zombie who might bite you. Period.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil 4 because I recently picked it up on Switch. And what I realized is like the game, it's scary in the sense that it's like tense
Yes.
because you never really know.
You never totally feel safe.
Right. You know,
Yeah.
and like the music and all that does like a really good job of setting up that atmosphere. And so that's why it's like it's scary in that way, not scary as in like the things you are seeing are so horrifying that they're going to scar you.
Yeah. Well, I also have a super soft spot for the first 4 Resident Evil games and Resident Evil 4. I'm counting 4 as part of that. So 1, 2, 3, Code Veronica, and 4, because all of these games are either intentionally or unintentionally or semi-intentionally super campy. Like they are funny experiences. And you know, it's one where I genuinely can't tell what the creative intent is. Obviously they are paying homage to a lot of like kind of schlocky zombie things. So like some of the low production values of like the voice acting or the writing like is in character with what they're doing, but it also just seems like, you know, these are pre the first one especially is a pre Metal Gear Solid game, right? That is doing this sort of like cinematic presentation way before other games are doing it. So it's very like baby's first stab at it, right?
But also when they're like successful, because as the series grows,
Yeah.
you know, they lean very much into like the cheesy nature of the shared history of the characters.
Mhm.
But when it's Resident Evil's on its A game, like I feel like Resident Evil 4 is a really good example of this. The dialogue is fun and like the adventure is cheesy and the interactions are cheesy, but it toes the line very carefully between being like silly and being cheesy. If that makes sense.
Yeah, like it is always sincere,
Mhm.
which I think is it's the relationship between camp and irony is a tricky one, and I think there is something that Resident Evil strikes that balance mostly perfectly, right? That like the characters are being sincere and like the artists are being sincere, even if they're telling like a goofy story sloppily, you know? Like it's so much fun. And horror plays into that perfectly. Like I think that horror is the perfect genre for that. So yeah, that's and I mean I'll also confess to loving these characters. Barry Burton is my favorite character in a video game. He's like the quintessential dad. Says the weirdest things. Is always like helpful. I love Barry. Barry's the best. But yeah, I think that the characters are a lot of what keeps me coming back to the series.
For sure.
Other broad strokes about why we like Resident Evil.
No, I mean I think we can dive into it.
Okay, so before we do dive into it, before I yes what you just said, I have some honorable mentions. So I came up with 5 moments that I'm like, these are individual specific moments that happen in these games, but here are some more sort of like nebulous things that I wanted to talk about that I really love about Resident Evil. So number 1 in my honorable mention are the insane challenges that the game will pose to unlock different game modes. So specifically, I'm thinking about the Hunk, the Fourth Survivor mode in Resident Evil 2, the original release of Resident Evil 2, where you have to beat the reverse scenario of the B scenario with one of the characters in like under 2 hours without using any health spray and without saving, and obviously then without dying. Just that the game puts forth these sort of like impossible challenges where it's like, do this so good no one could ever do it, and then you get to see more, is very exciting to me. I don't always do them, but when I get like super engaged in one of them, I just love it. So that's honorable mention number 1. Have you ever done any of those? Like the super challenging?
No,
ones?
I haven't.
It's I would probably hate it now, but as a kid, I really liked committing myself to one of those things. Honorable mention number 2. This is a mouthful, so bear with me. The Mercenaries Operation Mad Jackal. This is probably the only thing we're going to talk about from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. So it's the like Mercenaries mini game that is unlockable after you play through the whole game. just stupid because it's so fun. It should be its own thing that you can access from the beginning. But you play as Carlos, who is like the second character in Resident Evil 3, or two of his like squad mates, and you basically run around Raccoon City with a bomb implanted in your head, which is going to blow up after 2 minutes, but you get more time for everything that you kill. So it turns Raccoon City, first of all, I wish more games would do this. Take Raccoon City and just turn it into a playground where like everything is on fire and there are zombies everywhere. And then it like turns it into Smash TV, you know, where like you have a time limit and you're just like killing stuff left and right. It is well before the series like got to its like action, like before it became like an action game. And before like Mercenaries mode even made sense, they're like, yeah, we're doing it, and this is a purely action mode. Tank controls, weird camera angles, everyone looks like a pile of polygons, but it is a beautiful little game, or beautiful little game mode. And then the very last like honorable mention that I wanted to bring up is the way. So there have been two big like remakes of games in this series, right? The original and 2, and both of those remakes do such a good job of messing with players' expectations from having played the originals. They're obviously standalone experiences that are great in their own right, but like the original Resident Evil has, or the remake has zombies called Crimson Heads, which is when you kill a zombie and don't remove its head or burn it, it will come back later in the game. And the first time that happens, it's a terrifying thing because they're so powerful when they come back. And so like that just takes even if the game was 1-for-1, you know, the exact same map, exact same layout of everything, this one little twist changes the way that you approach everything. And then Resident Evil 2, Mr. X is so much more persistent and just like chases you down hallways in ways that you would never like imagine or tolerate or be any good at avoiding in the original. So like again, it takes what you know and is like, nope, it's scarier than you remember. And I don't think that the games get enough credit for like twisting your expectations in that way. So those are, you know, not moments, obviously, but things that I love about Resident Evil.
All right, should we get into our lists?
Let's get into our lists, yeah.
Okay, so my number 5 moment, you were talking a little bit before about how Resident Evil was this first stab at like a cinematic presentation.
Yes.
Way before like Metal Gear Solid or anything like that. One of the, I feel like, kind of forgotten things about Resident Evil 1 for the PlayStation is its live action opening.
Oh my god, that live action opening is so good.
So basically it's just full motion video like of actors basically acting out what later becomes like the voiceover dialogue cutscene type thing.
Yeah, and the costumes that they're wearing.
It's so cheap.
I mean, they must have seen like the pictures of the designs of the characters in game, and they're like, I don't know. I think we need like 3 pieces of cardboard to make that shoulder pad.
They look like they genuinely just look like the Halloween costume version, where instead of being like the character's real name, like you go to the costume store and it's not Alice in Wonderland, it's like Mushroom Girl,
right,
or something like that.
Right. Short hairy man with claws. Wolverine?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that original opening is and they get attacked by dogs in there too, and the dogs are obviously just like one rubber puppet.
But it's played completely straight.
Totally straight. And is it ends with like a little sizzle reel of like each of the characters, right? Which is funny because it just uses the footage from like the 2-minute cutscene that preceded it. But I remember playing this game, God, I guess probably right around when it came out, like 94 or something. And with my friend Jeff and his sister Jessica came in the room and was like, "Holy cow, is this what video games look like?" And we were like, "Kinda." Because like the last time she checked in was like Pac-Man or something,
right?
So yeah, it's that is an underrated and like totally unique thing that even Resident Evil didn't recreate.
Well,
later.
and like to your point, it's such a time capsule of where video games were
totally
in the PS1 era, when it's like it was game developers were putting on their big boy pants for the first time,
Yes.
but it was still so early.
Yes.
It was like pull-ups. It was the pull-ups of video games.
That's right. So it's respectable. Video game are for big boys. All right, my number 5 moment. Also kind of playing into the like cheesier end of Resident Evil. This is from Resident Evil 2 when Police Chief Irons fails the mayor's daughter. So this is when you are playing the Claire scenario and you walk into Chief Irons' office, and he is he's got an elevated way of speaking. Is very eloquent and has a almost like Shakespearean cadence. And he's got the mayor's daughter in a white strapless dress laid out on his desk, and she is dead. So he has failed in his job to protect the mayor's daughter, and he gives one of the like campiest, most scenery chewingest monologues in the whole series, and is like, while he's doing this, the player's eye drifts to all of these heads that are mounted on his wall, like deer and moose and stuff. And like there's a lull in his thing, and he goes, "And to think taxidermy used to be my hobby, but no longer." And I've never understood. I've never understood the turn to "but no longer." But it is a moment that is simultaneously funny and unnerving, that like you feel a genuine sense of dread about what this like last living authority figure in Raccoon City is up to and what his state of mind is, as he just sits with this dead girl's body on his desk. And he's speaking very matter-of-factly about, Claire's like, "Is there any way to stop it?" And he's like, "In a manner of speaking, you can put a bullet in their brain or burn the body." Like, he's just so like he's gone at that point. And the performance is so big and so campy. Like, I love it to death. And that's something that's missing from the remake. I'm sorry.
No, it was. So I haven't played the original Resident Evil 2 for a really long time.
Yeah.
So I don't remember this moment. And yeah, it's not. I was going to ask if it was in remake or if I like missed it or something.
The character is in the remake, but like they turn his interaction with the little girl whose name I'm blanking on right now, into a Sherry, into like a whole little section where you're playing as her and she's escaping from like his weird nursery thing.
Yeah.
Which is creepy and cool in its own right. But nothing really comes close for me to this scene.
So earlier you had said that when you brought up the Mercenaries mode that it was probably going to be the only mention of Resident Evil 3.
Oh, yeah!
But Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, one of my favorite Resident Evil moments is the first Nemesis encounter.
Yeah.
The first time you see Nemesis in that game where it just like destroys Brad.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Is Brad like flying in a helicopter and it just pulls out a rocket launcher and
No.
So you walk me through it.
Okay, so basically like you're in Raccoon City just like walking around
in a tube top. Wear some sleeves, girl. You're in a zombie apocalypse.
I'm pretty sure like Brad just like is there,
yeah,
and like you're like, "Oh, Brad," and then Nemesis comes down, grabs Brad, and then like,
he hand tentacles him,
and yes, exactly, hand tentacles him through the head, which you don't see that part,
right?
You just see the tentacle like extend,
yeah,
and Brad is super dead. And so, Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 remake is a little bit more Nemesis-y,
totally, yeah,
versus like the Mr. X that's in the original Resident Evil 2, which I guess is a little more just like subdued.
Yeah, I mean he's easier to fight in the original.
He's just not as unstoppable.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
That's like Nemesis's whole thing. Like the gimmick of the game, like the game is just built around this gimmick essentially. Yeah. Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 is terrifying.
Yeah,
because he felt unstoppable at the time.
Totally, and his design is great. Like Mr. X has a very he just looks like just regular flat face, like his bald head. He's Uncle Fester, basically, but 8 feet tall. And Nemesis looks like his face is made of like worms, and like someone got teeth out of a cadaver and stapled them onto a ham. Like he's great, and the way he announces himself every time he steps into a room, that like you'll walk in and the door will you'll walk past where you can see the door, and you'll just hear the door open, close, and he'll go, "Stars." It's so good.
I think Resident Evil 3. So I didn't play it until it came out on GameCube.
Yeah.
And I've been in the bag for Resident Evil for a really long time. Just like I bought Resident Evil 4 on Switch, even though it's overpriced.
That's right.
The Resident Evil 3 port on GameCube was
not
not good. I mean, it was just basically like the PS1 version in 2003. I think for full price. I think for $50.
Oh, totally, yeah.
But it was the first time I had played it. It blew my mind because it takes place mostly outside in Raccoon City instead of being like, in a mansion or police station or something.
And you do go through the police station, which is super cool, and it's at like a different point from Resident Evil 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could do a whole episode about how I don't have any more Resident Evil 3 on here, but just about how cool Resident Evil 3 is and how it's like kind of ill-remembered in the sort of like legacy of the series. But yeah, it takes so many chances and is so weird and it's such a cool game.
Capcom's kind of been hinting that they're going to be that they're working on a Resident Evil 3 remake. Allegedly not from the team that did RE2. Like they took that engine and like that work and basically outsourced the design and development of RE3 remake to somebody else.
I think that's
the
fine.
rumors.
I think that's fine.
I would be so excited if they end up doing it, because I mean, Mr. X to me felt in Resident Evil 2 remake felt like a total test for how would we do this.
Yeah.
Although now they'd have to like top it. They'd have to make Nemesis even.
Well,
that'd be like a difficult balance.
Here's how you top it though, and they already have. They've demonstrated this. You just give Nemesis a rocket launcher because, like, Mr. X is scary, but he never has a rocket launcher, Mark. Nemesis will walk into a room and from 8 feet away whip out a rocket launcher and shoot you with it. He's so cool.
He's so cool.
All right, my moment number 4 on my list here is returning to the Umbrella Island as Chris in Resident Evil Code Veronica. So a lot of Resident Evil games have the sort of mechanic of like you play through it as one character and you see 70% of the game. And you have to play through as another character, either as like a second scenario or just play the same scenario again, like in the original. But Resident Evil Code Veronica folds like all your playthroughs into one long playthrough, right? Are you familiar with Code Veronica?
No, so I've never played Code Veronica.
Okay, so Code Veronica, you start the game as Claire, and you are, Claire, the hero from Resident Evil 2, and you are out looking for Chris, your brother, and which is how she starts Resident Evil 2. And so she follows like a distress call to like France or something, and she gets kidnapped by Umbrella and taken to this island where Umbrella is conducting all sorts of experiments, and guess what? There are zombies. And so like she escapes from this island and goes to Antarctica, where there's like another laboratory, and there she succumbs to she's attacked and knocked out. Then the game just picks right back up, back on that original island, but now Chris is there chasing after her. So some time has passed, and everything that she changed there is now something that Chris needs to like encounter. It's
cool.
It's like the best possible way to recycle levels.
Is Code Veronica, does it play like Resident Evil 1 through 3, like same sort of like controls and everything?
So yes and no. It's all fully rendered backgrounds. So the camera does move with you, but it's on a very specific track. You can't really control it, and it still does the super dramatic camera angles, but it's not pre-rendered backgrounds. So it's way more dynamic, and has an insane story. That there may or may not be another moment from it on my list. So we will talk more about it as we get deeper in. But the fact that you find yourself back in this same space again, and like it is really, really cool. Like that, Claire is like throwing down like emergency shutters to like protect something. And then when Chris gets there, he's like, oh, I need to open these shutters to get like everything that he encounters, is in that state because Claire left it that way. And again, because the backgrounds aren't all pre-rendered, every space that you go into, something is different than when you were there last time. And it could just be like something is on fire, or something has been destroyed since you were last there, or like this room that used to be empty is now full of zombies, or this room that was full of zombies now has nothing in it. It's so cool that the game does its own remix of itself as part of a one continuous plot. It is great, and I think the best that Resident Evil has ever done of like the two character thing as one linear experience that it makes you do.
Have they released Code Veronica in like HD or on any of the other consoles? I'm surprised that you just don't see it released with all the other ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was originally a Dreamcast game, a Dreamcast exclusive. And today I was like, I want to get that game under my thumbs a little bit and like play it. So I was like, I'll pull out my Dreamcast copy because, as longtime listeners will know, I have a Sega Dreamcast. But I could not find my copy of Resident Evil Code Veronica for Dreamcast. And so I screamed for an hour straight, and then went on the PlayStation Store, and I can download it for $15. But I didn't do it because I was like, well, I just wanted to like hop in and play a little bit.
But they've never done like an because you know how like Resident Evil 4 is up-res, like looks good, it looks fine in HD.
I mean, I honestly don't know. It's Resident Evil Code Veronica X is the like special version of it that came out later for like PlayStation. Might have even been 2. And I don't know what the version is that's on PlayStation 4 right now.
Yeah, because it's a huge hole in my Resident Evil knowledge.
Yeah,
I need to pick it up. Okay, so here's my first one from Resident Evil 4.
Yeah,
the rolling boulder QuickTime event. The first time it happens.
Yeah.
So basically,
it's just a jam on the button one, or and you have to dodge.
Yeah, okay. You jam on the button and dodge, and it becomes like a mechanic throughout the game. Yeah. There are like times where you have to do like QuickTime events, but it's the first time I remember, anyways, encountering a QuickTime event.
Yeah, yeah, I do feel like Resident Evil 4 popularized QuickTime events, and it's actually one of the things that I hold against Resident Evil 4. But keep telling me about the first boulder.
Yeah, so basically, the way the game works is, or the way you encounter it, there's like a whole prologue where you're introduced to like kind of the mechanics, the game, the village, all that kind of stuff. Then afterwards, one of the first things that happens is you're going down this path. There's like a little cutscene where men are knocking over this enormous boulder, and then it comes rolling at you like Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
So you have to jam on one of the buttons to run really fast, and then at a specific moment, a 2-button combination will appear on the screen, and you have to hit it in enough time to dodge out of the way, or you just like die. The first time I played Resident Evil 4, this blew my mind because it was totally unexpected.
Yeah,
I had no idea what to expect. So and fine. So it shows up, the boulders rolling towards you. You are jamming the button, and then you have to do a button combination? What is this? I died multiple times at this. At the time, it felt insurmountable.
Yeah.
Even though it's really, like, not that hard.
It's not that hard.
It just totally, like, threw me for a loop. I loved it.
I do think that the fact that it is surprising, and it's, like, a little isolated incident, and when you fail it, it, like, spawns you right back.
Yeah.
So you can try it again really quick. That I think that and the QuickTime events like that are very effective in that game. Where I sour on the QuickTime events are like at the end as you're knife fighting Wesker. Is it Wesker? Or is it someone else? It might be someone else.
I can't remember.
It's been so long.
Yeah.
But like that whole fight plays out as like part cinematic, part like QuickTime event. That's where I'm like, I don't want to have to like listen to him, tell me that I'm a fool for the 4th time or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely diminishing returns. I mean, even later in the game, like you're fighting like the mayor, like the big like Rasputin looking guy. I can't remember what his name is. And at the beginning of that encounter, it's like a cutscene that rolls right into a QuickTime event, and it's just like a one. You just have to be always paying attention, basically, what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Is because, it's just a single button combination. But if you miss it, you die, and you have to, like, restart that part of it again.
Very good. My third moment is from the original Resident Evil 1. Barry dies in the laboratory. Now, Mark, you might be saying to me, huh? Barry's in other games after Resident Evil 1. here's the crazy thing about Resident Evil 1. There are 2 different times that Barry can die through the course of that game. And it's all based on like how much time you take in different parts of the game. This is almost one that becomes a little bit more abstract. Because Resident Evil 1 kept all of its secrets so well and didn't really tell you like, oh, if you don't hurry up and get out of here, Barry's going to die later. Like it was just keeping track of all these little stats quietly off screen that you didn't know what was going on. So you can get to a point, there are 2 different points in the game where you can just walk into a room and Barry is there dying. And then he dies. And you're like, wait, what? This character who, saves you from this room where the ceiling is caving in, this guy who throws a rope down so you can like climb out of a pit, just dies.
So what is happening? Like, why does he die?
He was just attacked by zombies. Like, that's another thing that like the game doesn't romanticize it at all. It's just like, yeah, he was bested. You didn't stick with him, and now he's dead. Which grants like real weight to your playthrough of Resident Evil 1 in a way that you don't like. I played that game through maybe 3 times as Jill before I encountered a version where Barry died. And it blew my mind that like there are little narrative things at work that I had no idea. It's not a big binary choice. It's not like a will you save Barry or will you save the girl or whatever. It's the game. It's an interactive storytelling in a way that is like so subtle and like off the map that like, which is a crazy thing to say about Resident Evil, which is the campiest, cheesiest, most oblique thing, but they keep this one secret, very well. And so to just have a playthrough, the game I've played many times, and I'm like going to, challenge Wesker for the last time. And instead of Barry being like, all right, Jill, go get him, he's lying on the floor and like bleeding out, was just incredible.
That's cool, especially when it's like your 3rd time through.
Yeah, where you're like, I know this game. I know what's going to happen next. I don't know what's going to happen next.
That's really cool. My second pick comes from, or my number 2 pick comes from Resident Evil Remake.
Okay.
And it's okay, do you remember in the game, I think it's the first time that you encounter like the Crimson Head, like the new type of zombie.
Yeah.
Where there's a coffin that is like tied up with chains or whatever, and it like when you get close to it, it like something's in there, like
yeah.
It like shakes.
Yeah.
And as through the course of the game, you are like gathering these masks, these like death masks, and when you get, I think it's 3 of them, then it's like the solution to the puzzle. You put them there, the coffin drops.
Yes.
And what comes out of this coffin but this Crimson Head zombie with like really long fingernails. It's the first time you encounter an enemy of this type, and it's so scary, especially because if you're going into Resident Evil Remake not knowing that something like that is coming.
Is that before or after the little girl that has her like family skin sewn into her body?
I think it's after, maybe.
Oh, because she is terrifying. That's a good moment though, and especially like putting the death masks. So you're already engaging in like a scarier version of, because normally Resident Evil is like, yeah, with the 3 crests, the wind crest and the sun crest. But then this is like, these are the death masks. And then a Crimson Head pops up.
It's just such like a cool reveal.
Yeah. That's a good moment. Ready for my number 2?
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 moment comes from Resident Evil 4. It is the farmhouse under siege. You are in a 2-story house. You and the president's daughter, whose name is Ashley. And to this point, you've basically been playing Resident Evil the way you've been playing Resident Evil, which is to say, you're not engaging in every. They're not zombies, but they're basically zombies. We call them zombies. You are only fighting the ones that you like know you need to fight. Ammo is limited. It's kind of hard to heal. Whatever. And then you're in a house that is just under siege by bad guys. They just keep coming, and you try to defend the first floor as best you can, pushing bookcases in front of windows and like locking doors and stuff, also while like shooting out windows. And you do the best you can, but you get overrun and you run upstairs, and then they are like pushing ladders. It's like up so that they can climb into that window, and they're still coming from downstairs. And the game becomes something that Resident Evil had not been to that point, which is like a just try to survive this as long as you can. And like she keeps healing you or like tossing ammo.
So it's not actually her. Like you
Oh,
tell
it's
her to
not
run
her.
upstairs, and
Yeah.
she hides, and that's when Lewis,
Oh yes,
like the
yes, that's right.
the resident, like that you don't really understand what he's doing at this point.
Yes, that's right.
But he is there, and he's the one that's like throwing you ammo.
Yes,
and, like,
thank you. Sorry,
leaving
I
items and
remembered
stuff
that wrong.
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a cool it's such a cool like little set piece. And to this day I don't really know what triggers the end of it.
I think it's just so I just played this part in
Oh,
Resident
yeah,
Evil 4.
yeah.
And I think it's just like after you've killed a certain amount of zombies.
Oh man,
Because they just continue to come in waves, and you can't escape the house.
no.
Like you just have to do it. And it's one of those points where like the survival part of Resident Evil as a survival horror game really comes into play. Because yes, like Luis will give you ammo, like he'll
Yeah.
occasionally like throw out ammo. But if you don't have like the right weapon, or like you want the shotgun and you want a lot of shotgun
yes,
ammo,
yes.
because otherwise like taking headshots at these enemies, there's too many of them.
Yeah.
And they also are the ones that in Resident Evil 4 where at this part of the game you've just started encountering when you do a headshot,
The Las
and
Plagas?
like the
Yeah.
Las Plagas stuff starts coming out, which means they have range and are more dangerous. They're basically like if when you do a headshot on some of the zombies, there's like a parasite that's living inside them that like comes out.
Yeah, in
And
the form of like a big sharp tentacle.
Right, exactly. That can like do a ton of damage if it hits you. And so you're in this confined space. They're running up the stairs. You're doing headshots to take them out quickly, and that's just causing you more problems. They just get up with like the big tentacle head thing. It's
Yeah.
so cool. It's really awesome.
It's an impossibly cool moment, and just like gives you the sense of like Resident Evil is so good at being like, okay, you're in a zombie city, and like how do you sneak by, how do you hide? But like there's this part of it too where it's just like the zombies are coming and you just gotta fight them. And it's such a cool moment, such a cool set piece in that game.
Well, kind of elaborating on that, my number one pick, my favorite moment in all of Resident Evil comes from Resident Evil 4, and it's the prologue. Up to the point where you see, like, you basically get like the Resident Evil 4 title screen.
Yeah.
And so that encompasses you're in a car, you're
Yep.
like getting like the lowdown, like what you're doing.
Save
You're
the president's
saving
daughter.
this president's daughter. You get out, you go into like a cabin, there's one guy, and you realize that like these are not zombies like we've known them from previous Resident Evil games. They're smarter, they're faster. Like there are points in the game where because they're like infected humans, and
Yeah.
but they're still human, so they act like humans. Like they don't just shuffle towards you. They will like run up really fast. A little bit later in the game, when you start like aiming with your cursor, if you take too long to fire,
They'll
they'll like
dodge out of the
dodge
way,
and like
yeah.
get out of the way. So I feel like that lead up is really cool. But then you go into the main village for the first time,
Yeah.
and you see all these people. They're just out there like working, doing farm work. And when you get spotted, they swarm, and that's when you encounter like the chainsaw guy for the first time.
Yeah.
And you realize that like combat in Resident Evil 4 is so much more important than in like some of the earlier Resident Evil games, because it is inescapable until you like take out a certain number of zombies.
Yeah.
It's just like such like a cool intro to that game, kind of like a mission statement for this is not
Totally.
Resident Evil as you know it. And then the title hits and you're off, and it's such an amazing start to such an amazing game.
Yeah, that's so good. And the like it does set the mission statement that I feel like is demonstrated by the house siege scene that I was describing before. And so like I love that we picked a moment that it promises and then a moment that it delivers. It's so cool. My number one, I'm going back to Resident Evil Code Veronica. Okay, so just to set the stage as you're very unfamiliar with the game. Eventually, Chris also makes his way to Antarctica, where Claire is, and they so it is strictly a lab situation in Antarctica. The part of the game. You and I have talked about this before, that like when you get to the lab, you're a little bit like, okay, it loses some of its, the Resident Evil part of it is sort of gone, right? So they're like going down in Claire and Chris. I think there's a part here where you can like switch off between them. And so like you're going down the various levels of this laboratory, and you walk into like this a long like decontamination hallway, and so you're like so far underground, and you encounter the edifice, the front of the Spencer Mansion from Resident Evil 1. And there is a replica of the Spencer Mansion down in the basement of this laboratory. And I don't really know that it's ever explained why, but you walk in and it's the mansion from Resident Evil 1 buried, 100 feet below the Antarctic surface.
That's so cool.
And it is so hard in there, and it's like the original game, but the puzzles are all like on steroids, and the enemies are brutal, and you just keep going down in it, right? And it's just so neat to effectively revisit the same space from the first game, but totally recontextualized, and instead of it being like the first thing you encounter, it's the last. And instead of like the mansion leading to the lab, it's the lab leading to the mansion. And it really, like, having that sort of thing down there is like such an eccentric and like weird thing that it perfectly plays to the Ashford family weirdo that is down there with his multiple personalities trying to mess you up. And I don't want to give away too much.
Oh,
about
that sounds so
how the game
cool.
ends, but it's so amazing, and is one of those super late game things that made me scream when I saw it. That I was just so happy, like turning on the Game Boy theme in Tetris 99, where I'm just like, oh my god, it's this thing that I know and I love. So that's my number one Resident Evil moment. Man, these are good games.
It's seriously. It makes me want to replay like 3 and 1 and remake.
Yeah, I wish that they would put out a package that is just 1, 2, 3 Code Veronica, just like up-res to HD, but not the remake of 1, not the remake of 2, just like the really perhaps 2 old school games. And maybe I can do save states or rewind or something, but like these are some great games. All right, Mark, let's close out our discussion here. That's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Do you have moments from Resident Evil that you love that we missed? We didn't talk about 0, about 5, about 6, or about 7, or even really about the remake of 2, or... Yeah, so there are a lot of games that we left out. Revelations, Outbreak. There are a lot of these games we didn't talk about. So if you have one that you want us to know about, write to us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. That's going to do it for this episode of the show. Remember, you can rate, review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you like this episode, please share us on Facebook or Twitter. If you recommend us to someone on Twitter, make sure to tag us, and you can win some Pokemon cards. Olivia Duncan. Oh, on Twitter. Sorry, I skipped ahead. On Twitter, I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell, and the show is at Nin Cart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thank you for listening.
Campfire.